Hello everyone and welcome to this talk for Atos Tech Day 2020. My name is Christopher Johnson. I am an energy and utility consultant in the UK and I'm going to be your facilitator for today's session. I'm really pleased today that we've been joined by our two speakers, Tom Swanson, who's our Chief Digital Officer in the UK for Atos and playing a global role in the water sector. And then Gordon Reid, General Manager for Zero Emissions at Scottish Water. Tom and Gordon today are going to be talking to us on the topic of accelerating decarbonisation, leveraging AI and edge computing to reach net zero and beyond. We're going to be doing so in a discussive format. For those of you who have questions for our presenters, feel free to put them in the question and answer zone, and I'll endeavour to ask them to our speakers towards the end when we have about 5 or 10 minutes to do so. So for now, Tom, Gordon, over to you.
Thanks, Christopher, and welcome everyone. As our Chief Exec said earlier on in his recent announcement, decarbonisation is now a priority on every CEO's agenda. Each industry has some unique characteristics and challenges, but a lot can be learned across sectors too. The water industry has a pivotal role to play, not just as a major energy user, but also in other ways that will become clearer through the conversation we're having today. So can I kick off, Gordon, and just ask you the question around to explain Scottish Water's specific take on decarbonisation and how central it is to your strategy?
Okay, Tom, thanks for that, and good morning, everybody. Last year in May 2019, the Scottish Government declared a climate emergency, and I was appointed to this role as General Manager Zero Emissions as part of Scottish Water's response to that. And my role is to lead and develop our route to net zero by 2040. And in parallel with that, Scottish Water was developing its revised 25-year strategic plan, which has at its heart its social purpose of supporting a flourishing Scotland. And to deliver that, we've got 3 key strategic ambitions: delivering great value for our customers, delivering great service for our customers, and at the same time going beyond net zero emissions. And the key thing about this, it's not doing value and service and then doing emissions separately. It's actually doing all 3 together, very much in a combined approach. And there's 2 key principles that we're going to be applying to this on our net zero journey. The first being that we must decarbonise all of our activities as much and as soon as possible, but at the same time delivering service excellence and great value. And then where we can't decarbonise, we must then look to offset and sequester sustainably the remaining emissions.
So Gordon, that's a really a clear ambition and very central to the strategy. Can you talk a little bit about the scale of the challenge that you're facing?
Yes, certainly. I mean, we've been monitoring our operational emissions for over 10 years now. We've got a very good view of the scale of our operational emissions. But uniquely in the UK water sector, on our net zero journey, we are not only looking at our operational emissions, but also the emissions associated with all of our investment activities. Now, operationally, there's just over 250,000 tonnes a year that we emit. That's a 45% reduction since we started measuring them some 10 years ago, and they're dominated by electricity. And we've got plans in place to actually see how we can reduce all of these to deliver net zero. But very importantly, on the investment side, and we've only been measuring that for a year or two, and we look at this from where you take the raw materials out of the ground, how you manufacture them into products, and ultimately how you get them to site and assemble them. And those emissions are tracked from wherever they arise across the globe. Now, that works out in our current estimates around about 140 to 210,000 tonnes of emissions per annum, so a very significant contributor. And the way that we're starting to look at that to help bring us focus is not just to look at the total amount of emissions, but to express them as the carbon intensity of investment, which is around about 200 to 300 tonnes per £1 million of investment. And that's just helped give our investment colleagues a focus on how can they reduce that down towards net zero. And with a capital investment programme of 700 million tonnes a year, and £700 million per year, which is going to grow over time, that's a significant challenge for us to reduce these emissions.
So the ambition's clear, and you understand the scale of the challenge, Gordon. Can you say a bit about what the key components of your approach is and how you're bringing that together into a coherent programme?
Yeah, so we've been developing our NetZero Route Map, and what you see here on the graphic is our NetZero Route Map on the page. And we've got two areas of focus here. The outer arch are the plans on how we're going to address the 5 key areas of our activities that drive our emissions, which we need to reduce to deliver net zero. But equally, as I said, we've got at our heart our social purpose of supporting a flourishing Scotland. So as well as all the internal facing activities that we will do with our teams to reduce those, there's the how can we support flourishing Scotland by growing Scotland's natural capital, growing hosting of renewables, supporting the hydrogen economy and heat from sewers to decarbonise heat and transport, utilising our assets and resources. So that's a key facet for us, that inward and external focusing to deliver the social purpose. And all of that is built on a foundation of people. Because unlike an assembly line factory where you could change out your machinery to deliver a net zero product, a lot of it is about how people act and the behaviours they have. Because everything that we do, no matter whether you're in an office or in our treatment works in the field, all that we do drives emissions. So all of our activities are going to have to be changed. And I think that's the same for organisations across the world, no matter what sector you're in. Each of us are going to have to do something differently. And what we want our people to understand is what are the things they're currently doing that drive emissions, and how might we do things differently to achieve net zero in a sustainable way. So it's behaviours to change and our character. Think of that as the culture of the organisation. What are the things we're going to have to look at differently, for example, from a leadership perspective to deliver net zero? So a real big challenge that we've got to deliver this.
So Gordon, this is clearly a radical transformation. Talk a bit about the timing and phasing of the route map as you go forward.
So this is a 20-year journey that we're embarking on, because we've set ourselves a target of delivering net zero by 2040. And we're going to be working across a broad range of activities, as you saw on the previous slide. So some things we'll be able to make movement on quite rapidly. Others we need to actually learn a bit more before we take forward. But across this wide range of activities, there's going to be 4 common themes. To start off, we need to understand the emissions and appraise our options and prioritise them, because we want to be able to deliver net zero and be able to demonstrate to our customers that we've done it at the lowest cost to customers. So if I identified what we want to do, we'll initiate and demonstrate activities, and when we are able to show that they're successful, we'll look to grow them at scale and then sustain them. And as I said, some things we can move quite quickly on. We have, for example, been working on delivering energy efficiency improvements for a number of years, and we know what we're doing there. We'll push that forward quite rapidly. Other areas, growing the sequestration capabilities of our land bank. We've got less experience there. We need to work with some research colleagues to understand sequestration rates before we actually can start increasing them. So they'll move at slightly different journeys over the next 20 years. And throughout this, we'll be keeping a track. We'll have a suite of performance metrics that shows how we are progressing on that road to net zero.
Fantastic. So I think, as you can see, this is a very thorough, a very thoughtful and comprehensive approach to decarbonisation, and really an exemplar from what we've seen across various industries. So, but working with Gordon, there's great development work in this roadmap, but we thought it was time to really test it and to validate it, and also to see if there was any opportunities perhaps that hadn't surfaced. So to do this, we designed and ran an event that we call a Strathack. A Strathack, these are amazing, energising events. You can see Christopher presenting at the front here, who designed it. When our clients have a complex strategic challenge, Strathacks are an excellent vehicle to not only clarify strategy, but to move through into accelerated execution, which is imperative here. For the Scottish Water NetZero Strathack with Gordon, we brought together over 60 people to work on challenging the roadmap. 50% of those people were from all across Scottish Water. Every aspect of the business was represented. The whole system of Scottish Water was in the room. The other 50% included people from the regulatory side, academics with a range of specialisations, some niche partners, and also Atos brought members of our scientific community and industry experts and partners to the event too. These diverse perspectives not only gave challenge, but also generated really creative ideas. And not only that, but allowed Scottish Water to build the engagement with an ecosystem of stakeholders that will be important as the journey unfolds. So the event, as well as achieving validation, we really wanted to channel the ideas that came from the Strathack and form it into an investment portfolio. Now, this investment portfolio recognises that some of the ideas are quite well understood. And these investments, for example, around condition-based monitoring, building management, have quite high levels of certainty using proven technologies and impact. But many are, as Gordon said, much more experimental and exploratory in nature, almost R&D type activities. So building this decarbonisation investment portfolio ensures the balance of investments over each of the phases of the route map, but also helped us to identify some areas and some opportunities for further work. And what emerged from the follow-up from this was perhaps there was an opportunity to do more with AI and edge exploitation to accelerate the progress. And with Gordon and Simon Parsons, who's head of strategy at Scottish Water, we agreed 3 priority areas to go after very quickly in an accelerated way. 2 of these are very industry specific and require deep domain knowledge to really pursue. If you take leakage reduction, some water companies lose 30% of the processed water to leakage, but there has been amazing innovation in this area, but AI and edge can actually boost this progress. If you go to per capita consumption on the right-hand side, this is really more of a behavioural issue to get citizens to consume water more wisely and think about the carbon impact of water, wasting water. The third one around asset energy efficiency is perhaps more universal, so let's take a deeper look at that one. When it came to this programme and accelerating it, there was work already underway to look at how can you detect, using energy fluctuations and applying AI to take out seasonality, etc., how can you detect anomalies in the equipment across a range of sites? So a pilot of detecting anomalies has been completed across 33 sites, evidencing around between 6 and 8% energy reduction. But there's also some really great spin-off benefits in terms of maintenance and asset care. And where we are now is we're scaling the algorithms and the data flows for this work to around 1,750 stations. Now in this project, we're working as one team with Scottish Water and Atos. The Scottish Water analytics capability is fantastic, and we're bringing our analytics capability and data engineering to accelerate these efforts. Beyond this, we're going to look at maybe more complex sites that will require energy fluctuation monitoring and also condition-based monitoring. So, but Gordon, it would be good if you could spend a couple of minutes just reflecting on the Strathack and the role it played, but also the importance of these edge and AI projects too, please.
Certainly, Tom. I mean, what was really good about the Strathack is that it helped to validate a number of areas of our thinking where we thought we'd be able to make progress on net zero, but it also brought a number of new ideas to the table, which we were able to start exploring and which we believe firmly will help accelerate our progress towards delivering net zero. And I'm really pleased that since the Strathack back in January, we've made very rapid progress with some of the digital analytical opportunities that Tom's identified. Because not only have we been able to pilot this analytic technique at a couple of dozen pumping stations, we're on the cusp of actually expanding the coverage to well over 1,000 of our pumping stations. And that's going to make a big difference to both the consumption of electricity at those assets, which gives us a financial benefit, as well as the emissions benefit and service benefit, because it's avoiding failures. And it also leads into asset life improvement, because we can identify problems earlier. So we're really pleased that we're making progress with that, as well as the leakage in per capita. And my ask of our digital partners is that we do what we can to maximise the exploitation of digital techniques, because it's such a rapidly emerging and changing area in analytics that what we can apply now, what will we be able to apply in 2 years' time? So this is going to be an ongoing journey, not just in the next 2 to 5 years, but well beyond that. How do we keep exploiting this and the leading edge activities from digital techniques to really make a difference, to drive down emissions, but at the same time give wider improvements to service? I firmly believe we're barely scratching the surface with some of these digital techniques. And just our experiences globally of living in lockdown under COVID-19, about how we've all picked up the new digital skills, for example, of working from home and coming into events like this online across the globe. It just shows how we can start exploiting these things. And one of the lessons from history about pandemics is that as you emerge from a pandemic, the technologies and changes that were already in place get rapidly accelerated. And I think digital is ripe for that rapid acceleration. And I look forward to working with Atos to progress a lot of work in this area.
That's great. Thanks, Gordon. Actually, it's worth mentioning, as Gordon says, about online activity. In these COVID times, we've actually found a way to do Strathacks online, because as you can see here, at the time it was a physical event, but we've now adapted to be able to do these with online tools. One final thing, though, is that in designing the Strathack, we made a very important choice, we believe, which was, although clearly there's an emergency in terms of climate emergency, but we chose to frame the Strathack in a more aspirational Moonshot focus, and really drawing parallels with the space program, the Apollo space program through the 60s. The reason why we felt this was important is that people can get anxious and perhaps a little paralysed by the enormity of the task, but framing it as a moonshot retains the urgency, generates a more creative mindset, and is a more inspirational framing of it. And actually remember that they estimate that only 400,000 people were involved in NASA, in the NASA space program. So imagine the power of working across companies and across industries to tackle this challenge. It really is the moonshot of our area, decarbonisation. So Gordon, do you want to close just with your own views in terms of what it means for you and for Scottish Water to take this moonshot approach through the next years?
Yeah. As you said, Tom, this is a global climate emergency, and some people's reaction to that would be panic or fear. But I take a very different approach. I firmly believe that whilst delivering net zero is a huge challenge, it's also one that's achievable. Okay? It will take time, it will take a lot of effort, and we'll all be doing things differently, but I firmly believe that it is achievable and that all businesses will be able to deliver on it. I wouldn't have taken up this role if I did not believe that Scottish Water could deliver net zero. It's going to involve us all doing lots of innovation and all of us doing things very differently, but I firmly believe it's achievable. And I would say to any organisation on today's call, your organisation can do it. I'm very confident that ours can. The only challenge is how long it will take us to get there.
Yeah, thanks, Gordon. And we share that commitment. We're proud and inspired to work with Scottish Water in partnership, and also Ellie's recent announcement of Atos' aspiration around net zero means that we're perfectly aligned as we go forward to help on this journey to net zero. So thanks to Gordon for taking us through that. Much appreciated. And I'll pass over to Christopher again just for some questions and answers.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you, Gordon and Tom. I want to start with some questions then. Perhaps first to you, Gordon. I was interested in what you saw as being the key challenges for Scottish Water in achieving this stretch ambition.
Thanks, Chris. Now, there's many aspects that we're going to have to address here, but maybe two that I would call out straight away are linked into procurement and people. And I say procurement because whether it's your operational emissions or your investment emissions, it's the things we buy from our supply chain, that drive emissions. So we really need to engage with our total supply chain and look to them to say, well, how can we work with you to deliver low emission or zero emission alternatives to the products we currently get from you? So whether that's electricity, how do you get purchasing renewable electricity in construction? How do you get low carbon, zero carbon cement, or even low zero carbon office supplies? Everything, all the goods and services we procure, we need to be able to procure zero or low emission alternatives. And that brings me on to the second point, a key point about people, because it's people who use these materials. What are the capabilities that we need to grow in our people? What are the behaviours that we need to grow in our people? How do we get people to understand what they need to do differently? Okay, so those two areas are very closely linked that all organisations need to make progress on to deliver the net zero journey.
Yeah, can I just add to that, Chris? I think that aspect of behaviour is one of the things we're seeing with the AI and edge efforts, is that it's essential to work in an agile fashion. It's genuinely an exploration, and we have to work in an agile way. I think one thing for me is that somehow or other organisations have to also improve the pace of decision making. The decision making cycles are going to have to become more agile also, because some of this work is exploratory. So that would be my addition to Gordon's comment.
Great, thank you, Tom. And I was just going to come back to you actually. Could you tell us a bit more about the extent to which AI and edge sensors are going to be important in Scottish Water and other companies achieving this journey?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think in addition to the work we're doing on AI with Scottish Water, we're also doing extensive work where we're improving the field intelligence to manage the networks, the networks within Scottish Water, but also looking at extending the sensing capability. We can extend the data set with a wise selection of sensors. It's not about putting sensors everywhere. It's about using intelligence to understand where the impact can be gained and applying sensors in that context. I think that also triggers the thought that, you know, Atos has a heritage of working in a industry-specific way. An exemplary part of that would be around world grid and energy and utilities. But a recent move to strengthen that verticalisation, I think, is imperative, because these challenges are by nature very industry-specific and domain-specific. So that expertise and understanding and working closely with the client to really understand the specific applications is important, and I think it unlocks a whole range of potential now for sensing, for edge and for AI.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom. And Gordon, I was hoping to come back to you with another question around the cost of achieving this decarbonisation objective for Scottish Water. How is that seen within the business, and how do you go about kind of balancing out with the benefit that it drives?
It's a really good question, that, Chris, because a lot of people say to me, well, isn't it going to cost money to deliver net zero? I actually come at this from a different perspective, which is how much potential is there to save money and deliver value for customers by delivering net zero? Because as I've been developing our route map, every opportunity I see to deliver net zero also generally comes with a value benefit as well. So, for example, in energy efficiency, if we're using less energy, we're paying less for that energy. So you get a double whammy. A lot of the low emission materials we're finding for construction, for example, they are also not costing more than the traditional alternatives. And one of the big learnings we've got in the investment programme is setting off on the right foot, which is what is the low carbon option that you can select for that project. And then having selected the lowest carbon option, which also tends to come with the lowest cost, you then look for your delivery partners to outperform. So I think there's lots of opportunities for a business to deliver net zero, but not at adding cost. It's actually potentially a significant cost reduction opportunity.
Fantastic. Thank you, Gordon. Tom, we've received some questions from our audience. Adam asks, how is the energy reduction contribution of asset inefficiencies measured within the use case that you described just now?
So effectively, when we monitor the energy of the pumping stations and we start to take out, we filter out the seasonality and other factors to get at the underlying performance of the equipment. And that underlying performance of the equipment, if the equipment's starting to drift off from optimal or starting to have a problem, you can actually see that drift by the actual energy indicators themselves. So it's actually a very simple detection. We haven't required any additional sensors. We're effectively monitoring the energy usage at these pumping stations. As Gordon says, there's over 1,000 of these simple ones at the moment. So it's purely the energy monitoring, using some clever stuff to take out the seasonality effects and other effects to get to the root anomaly of equipment drifting from optimum. And the interesting thing is not only does that give us an energy benefit if we can detect that in advance and predict it, but also, as I mentioned, you can get spin-off benefits in terms of the maintenance aspects, and there's some cost savings there, but also very critically in terms of asset life extension and asset care. So that's how we're going after it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tom. We have a question from Thierry asking about the impact of Scope 3. Now, I think this is relating back to our slide here, Gordon, about the route map that you're taking on this journey.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a bit more about the third element in the scope here around behaviours and around how Scottish Water is seeking to address that side of things?
What I'd like to focus here, Chris, is actually on Scope 3 emissions, because they're a real interesting characteristic, and I will come back to behaviours as part of this answer. Our investment activities fall under Scope 3, but also customers' use of our product falls under Scope 3. And when a customer uses water in the house and heats it up in their boiler for showers, etc., the carbon emissions associated with the heating of that water are much higher than the carbon emissions associated with cleaning the water and treating the water and getting it to your house. So part of the behavioural aspects of this is that we want to work with customers, not just on per capita consumption, but looking at using water efficient devices so that they will use less in the home, so they've got to heat it less. But equally, and this comes back into our purpose of supporting a flourishing Scotland, how can we work with others to decarbonise heat and power in the home? At the moment, most water in the UK is heated on natural gas fuel burners. But how will that change as the heating system is decarbonised? Might that burner, for example, use hydrogen? So that would drive the heating of the water to be zero emissions. So we need to work with others on some of these emerging technologies, but equally work with customers on their behaviours of how they use water on a day-to-day basis. And all these will help impact Scope 3 emissions.
Brilliant. I think that's just about as
can
much
I
time
just
as
add
we
something?
have. Tom? Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, in the per capita consumption area, we're looking at having people value water in the same way they think about the carbon footprint they generate from air travel, etc., and really valuing it more and understanding the carbon impact.
It's a good build. Thank you, Tom. And thank you, Tom and Gordon. That's as much time as we have today. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. We haven't been able to cover all of them, but we'll get back to you offline with some answers in response to them. Just to let you know that this session has been recorded, so you can listen back to it or you can share it with your colleagues. For the time being, thank you all for joining us, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.